20,000 fans came to see Marvin Gaye perform that November night in Detroit, but none expected to witness the most beautiful moment of his career. When 60-year-old James Patterson clutched his chest and fell during Let's Get It On, Marvin didn't just stop singing, he became a guardian angel. For 48 years, this story remained buried, until Patterson's daughter finally revealed what Marvin whispered to her dying father. If stories of human compassion and hidden kindness move you as deeply, please subscribe to our channel for more untold tales of music's greatest legends. November 15, 1975. The Fox Theater in Detroit was electric with anticipation as Marvin Gaye prepared for what would become one of the most extraordinary concerts in soul music history. The Prince of Soul had been struggling with personal demons for months. His marriage to Anna Gordy was crumbling. His relationship with Berry Gordy and Motown was strained, and the pressures of fame were weighing heavily on his shoulders. But that night, something magical was about to happen that would remind everyone why Marvin Gaye was not just a musical genius, but a human being with an extraordinary heart. The sold-out crowd of 20,000 fans had been waiting for hours to see their idol perform. Among them was James Patterson, a 60-year-old auto worker from Highland Park who had saved for months to buy front-row tickets for himself and his daughter Linda. Patterson had been a fan since Marvin's early days with the Miracles' backing vocals, and this concert represented a dream come true for the soft-spoken factory worker who had spent his entire life building cars and raising his family. He had no idea that this night would change not only his life but reveal a side of Marvin Gaye that the world had never seen. The evening began like any other Marvin Gaye concert. The stage lights dimmed, the crowd erupted in thunderous applause, and Marvin emerged wearing his signature white suit, looking every inch the superstar the world knew him to be. He opened with Distant Lover, his voice soaring through the theater with the kind of emotional power that had made him a legend. The audience was mesmerized, swaying to the rhythm, lost in the magic that only Marvin Gaye could create. For the first hour, everything proceeded normally, hit after hit, each song building the energy higher and higher. But as Marvin launched into Let's Get It On, something extraordinary was about to unfold. James Patterson, who had been dancing and singing along with pure joy, suddenly felt a sharp pain shoot through his chest. The music that had been filling his heart with happiness suddenly became a soundtrack to terror as his cardiac system began to fail. Patterson grabbed his chest, his face contorting in agony, and before his daughter Linda could react, he collapsed forward onto the barrier separating the audience from the stage. What happened next defied every convention of live performance. Marvin, who was mid-verse, singing the line "I've been really trying, baby," stopped abruptly when he saw the commotion in the front row. Most performers would have continued, trusting security to handle the situation. But Marvin Gaye was not most performers. Without hesitation, without consulting his manager or security team, the Prince of Soul set down his microphone, walked to the edge of the stage, and jumped down into the crowd. The theater fell into stunned silence as 20,000 people watched their idol kneel beside a stranger in distress. Patterson was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his skin turning gray. Linda was screaming for help, tears streaming down her face as she watched her father slip away. But Marvin remained calm, placing his hand on Patterson's chest and leaning close to whisper something in his ear. Later, Linda would reveal that her father, in his moments of semi-consciousness, heard Marvin's voice saying, "Stay with us, brother. Your daughter needs you. God's not ready for you yet." The crowd watched in amazement as Marvin refused to return to the stage until paramedics arrived. For 12 minutes that felt like an eternity, the Prince of Soul stayed with James Patterson, holding his hand, talking to him, and even beginning to sing "What's Going On" softly as a prayer rather than a performance. When the ambulance finally arrived, Marvin personally helped lift Patterson onto the stretcher and told the paramedics, "Take care of him, he's family now." But the story doesn't end there. What the audience couldn't see was Marvin quietly slipping a piece of paper into Linda's hand before returning to the stage. On it was his personal phone number and a note that read, "Call me when he's better. We're going to take care of your family." The concert resumed, but something had fundamentally changed. The 20,000 fans had witnessed something more powerful than any song. They had seen genuine love in action. James Patterson survived the heart attack, spending 2 weeks in intensive care at Detroit Receiving Hospital. What Linda Patterson would later reveal to the world was that Marvin Gaye didn't just save her father's life that night, he became part of their family. True to his promise, Marvin called the hospital every day to check on Patterson's condition. When Patterson was stable enough for visitors, Marvin came to see him, not as a superstar making a publicity stop. The meeting between Marvin and Patterson in that hospital room was a moment that neither man would ever forget. Patterson, still weak but alive, looked up at the man who had literally jumped off a stage to save him and said simply, "Why?" Marvin's response revealed the depth of his character. "Because that's what we do for each other. Music brings us together, but love keeps us together." They talked for hours about life, family, faith, and the bonds that connect all human beings regardless of fame or circumstance. But Marvin's compassion extended far beyond that hospital visit. When Patterson was released, he discovered that all of his medical bills had been paid anonymously. When he returned to work at the auto plant, he found that someone had arranged for him to have a less physically demanding position that wouldn't strain his recovering heart. Linda Patterson later learned that Marvin had quietly established a fund to ensure her father's medical care and had personally spoken to the plant supervisor about accommodating Patterson's condition. The most remarkable aspect of this story was how Marvin insisted on keeping it secret. In an era when celebrities often publicized their charitable acts for positive press, Marvin specifically requested that the Patterson family never speak publicly about what had happened. He wanted no recognition, no media attention, no credit for his actions. "Good deeds done for cameras aren't good deeds," he told Linda. "They're performances. What I did for your father was between him, me, and God." Berry Gordy initially tried to capitalize on the story when he learned about it, seeing an opportunity to generate positive publicity for Marvin during a difficult period in his career. But Marvin adamantly refused, threatening to end his relationship with Motown if the story was ever made public. Gordy, recognizing the genuine nature of Marvin's convictions, agreed to help keep the secret, even going so far as to have the concert footage edited to remove the incident before any recordings were released. The Patterson family honored Marvin's request for privacy for decades, but the impact of his kindness rippled through their lives in ways both big and small. James Patterson lived for another 23 years, long enough to see his daughter graduate from college, get married, and have children of her own. He often said that Marvin Gaye had given him the greatest gift possible: time. Time to see his family grow, time to make peace with his own mortality, and time to understand that fame and success mean nothing without compassion and love. Linda Patterson kept Marvin's phone number, and the two maintained a correspondence that lasted until his death in 1984. Their letters, which Linda has preserved, reveal a side of Marvin that contradicts his public image as a troubled, tormented artist. In his personal correspondence, he was thoughtful, spiritual, and deeply concerned with helping others. He wrote about his struggles with fame, his desire to use his platform for good, and his belief that every person has the power to change someone else's life for the better. One particularly moving letter, written in 1981, shows Marvin's philosophy about compassion. "Linda, people think being famous means you're different from everyone else, but that night with your father taught me the opposite. We're all just people trying to get through this life, and sometimes we need someone to reach down and help us up. Your father would have done the same for me if our positions were reversed. That's what makes us human." The true scope of Marvin's hidden charitable work only became clear after his tragic death in 1984, when estate lawyers discovered records of numerous anonymous donations, medical bill payments, and educational scholarships that Marvin had quietly funded throughout his career. The Patterson incident wasn't an isolated act of kindness. It was part of a pattern of compassion that Marvin had been practicing for years, always in secret, always without recognition. Through interviews with family members, friends, and beneficiaries, a picture emerged of an artist who used his success as a platform for helping others. Marvin had quietly paid for college educations for dozens of underprivileged students in Detroit. He had covered medical expenses for families who couldn't afford treatment. He had even purchased homes for elderly fans who were facing eviction. All of this was done through intermediaries and legal arrangements that protected the recipient's privacy and Marvin's desire for anonymity. The contrast between Marvin's public struggles and his private generosity reveals the complexity of a man who was often misunderstood by the media and the public. While tabloids focused on his personal problems, his battles with addiction, and his conflicts with Motown, Marvin was quietly building a legacy of compassion that touched hundreds of lives. His philosophy seemed to be that personal pain didn't excuse him from helping others. If anything, it made him more empathetic to those who were suffering. Linda Patterson finally decided to share her family's story in 2023, nearly 40 years after Marvin's death, because she felt the world needed to know about his hidden kindness. "Everyone knows about his music," she said in her first public interview about the incident. "Everyone knows about his troubles, but nobody knows about his heart. My father lived 23 extra years because Marvin Gaye cared enough to jump off a stage and hold his hand. That's the Marvin I want people to remember." The revelation of the Patterson story has led other beneficiaries of Marvin's secret charity to come forward, creating a fuller picture of his character. Maria Santos, whose mother's cancer treatment was paid for by an anonymous donor in 1978, discovered through estate records that it was Marvin. Robert Williams, who received a full scholarship to Howard University in 1982, learned that his mysterious benefactor had been the Prince of Soul. Each story adds another dimension to the legacy of a man who believed that true success was measured not by record sales or awards, but by the positive impact you have on other people's lives. The medical records from James Patterson's heart attack, preserved in Detroit Receiving Hospital's archives, document the remarkable circumstances of his survival. Dr. Margaret Collins, who treated Patterson that night, noted in her report that she had never seen a patient respond so positively to treatment after such a severe cardiac episode. She attributed his recovery partly to the fact that he had received immediate emotional support at the scene, which helped prevent him from going into shock. Someone holding his hand and talking to him during those critical minutes may have saved his life, she wrote. The Fox Theater has since installed a small plaque near the front of the stage, not specifically mentioning Marvin or the Patterson incident, but simply reading, "In recognition of the power of music to heal, comfort, and unite us all." Those who know the story understand its deeper meaning. It's a tribute to a moment when an artist proved that fame is meaningless without humanity, and that the greatest performances sometimes happen when the music stops. The Patterson family continues to honor Marvin's memory through their own acts of kindness. Linda Patterson became a nurse, inspired by the compassion Marvin showed her father. Her children volunteer at the hospital where their grandfather was treated, creating a ripple effect of kindness that extends Marvin's legacy into the next generation. James Patterson's grandchildren have never met Marvin Gaye, but they carry his influence in their commitment to helping others. Today, when people discuss Marvin Gaye's legacy, they often focus on his musical innovations, his influence on soul and R&B, and his tragic end. But for those who knew about his secret acts of kindness, his true legacy lies in the lives he touched, the families he helped, and the example he set of using success as a platform for compassion. The night he saved James Patterson's life wasn't just beautiful because of its drama or its unexpectedness. It was beautiful because it revealed the heart of a man who understood that our greatest purpose is to lift each other up. In a world that often celebrates fame for its own sake, Marvin Gaye's hidden kindness reminds us that true greatness lies in what we do when no one is watching, when there are no cameras rolling, when there's nothing to be gained except the satisfaction of knowing you've made someone else's life a little better. The Prince of Soul didn't just give the world incredible music, he gave individual people hope, healing, and the knowledge that someone cared enough to reach out when they needed it most. The story of November 15, 1975 stands as a testament to the power of compassion to transform not just individual lives but entire legacies. Marvin Gaye could have continued singing that night, could have let others handle the emergency, could have maintained the distance that fame usually creates between performer and audience. Instead, he chose to be human first and famous second, and in doing so, he created a moment of beauty that has lasted far longer than any song ever could.